did not want to leave Earth. She had told her parents this many times. She had told the government officials who came to her school. She had told everyone who would listen. But nobody cared what a 17-year-old girl wanted when the future of human relations with alien species was at stake. Earth had joined the Interstellar Compact 3 years ago. It was a big deal. Humans were no longer alone in the universe. There were dozens of intelligent species out there, and they had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Compared to them, humans were like babies taking their first steps. The Compact decided that the best way to build trust was to exchange students. Young people from different worlds would study together at the Galactic Unity Academy. They would learn about each other. They would become friends. And when they grew up, they would lead their species toward peace and cooperation. That was the plan, anyway. Was chosen because she was different. The government people said she had special qualities. She had grown up in the mountains of Provence, far from the cities. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents moved to Seoul for work. The old woman had taught things that most modern people had forgotten: how to read the weather by watching the clouds, how to find water in the wilderness, how to stay calm when a wild boar blocked your path. The officials called these survival instincts. They said would represent the best of humanity. She would show the aliens that humans were strong and adaptable. Thought they just wanted to send someone expendable, someone whose family did not have enough power to say no. The journey to Station Helix 7 took 3 weeks, spent most of it in a small cabin, reading about the alien species she would meet. They were tall and thin, with skin you could almost see through. They came from a cold world with very little gravity. They looked like giant beetles with hard shells. They moved slowly but thought quickly. They were the strangest of all. They floated in the air using gas bladders inside their bodies, and they talked by changing colors. None of them came from planets like Earth. When finally arrived at the station, she understood why. Station Helix 7 was a ring of white metal floating in space. Everything inside was clean and smooth and quiet. The air was thin and cool. The gravity was light, maybe half of what was used to. The lights were soft and pale. It was like walking into a hospital. Everything was designed to be gentle and safe. An official met her at the docking port. His name was, and he would be one of her instructors. His shell was dark brown with golden patterns, and his voice came from somewhere inside his chest. "Welcome to the Academy of Earth," said. His words were translated by a small device in his ear. "We have prepared special accommodations for your comfort." "Thank you," said. She tried to be polite. "You may find our environment challenging at first," continued. "You're as classified as a Category 7. The conditions here are much safer." There was that word. Had read about it during her journey. The Compact had a system for rating planets based on how dangerous they were. Most civilized species came from Category 1 or 2 worlds. Calm weather, stable geology, gentle ecosystems. Earth was Category 7, the second highest rating possible. According to alien scientists, Earth was a nightmare. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was full of toxic oxygen. The weather could change from sunny to deadly in minutes. The planet was covered with predators, parasites, and diseases. And worst of all, the dominant species had evolved by hunting and fighting and surviving against impossible odds. Humans were not supposed to exist. According to the numbers, they should have died out millions of years ago. But somehow they had survived. Somehow they had thrived. And now they were walking among civilized species like they belonged there. This made the other species nervous. Led through the station to her quarters. Along the way, they passed groups of students from other worlds. They stared at her with their pale, translucent eyes. They pulled their limbs closer to their shells. They floated away, their colors shifting to shades of yellow and orange. "Is she the Terran?" someone whispered. Look at her eyes, binocular vision, a predator's eyes. "I heard they eat animal flesh. I heard they can run for hours without stopping. They chase prey until it dies from exhaustion. Kept her face calm. Her grandmother had taught her that showing emotion to strangers was a sign of weakness. The mountain does not care what the wind says, the old woman used to tell her. It simply stands. Her quarters were small but comfortable. The bed was too soft and the ceiling was too low, but did not complain. There was a window that looked out into space, showing the endless stars. She stood there for a long time, thinking about home. The next day, classes began. Walked into her first lesson and felt every eye turned toward her. There were about 30 students in the room, and a few species she did not recognize. She was the only human. The instructor, a named Sorrel, gestured for her to take a seat. The only empty spot was in the back corner, far from everyone else. "Class, this is from Earth," Sorrel announced. "She will be studying with us this term. I trust you will make her feel welcome." Nobody said anything. Nobody even looked at her directly. Sat down and opened her data pad. The lesson was about interstellar navigation, something she already knew from her journey, but she took careful notes anyway. It was better to stay busy than to notice how everyone avoided her. During the break between classes, a student approached her. His name was, and he had pearl-white eyes that seemed to glow in the soft light. "You are very small for us," said. "I expected something more frightening." Looked up at him. He was almost a full meter taller than her. "I am sorry to disappoint you." "It is not a disappointment," said. He sounded amused. "It is a relief. Perhaps the stories about your species are exaggerated." "What stories?" "That you are violent, that you kill for pleasure, that your planet is a hellscape of constant death." His thin lips curved into a smile. "But look at you. You are just a small girl with dark hair and strange round eyes, not scary at all." Felt something hot rise in her chest. Anger, but she pushed it down the way her grandmother had taught her. "My planet is dangerous," she said quietly, "but that does not make me dangerous." "Of course not," said. He patted her shoulder with his long, thin fingers. "You are practically harmless." He walked away, laughing. Some of the other students laughed too. Sat alone in the corner and said nothing. She watched the other students talk and joke and study together. She watched the way they moved through the station like they owned it. She watched the way they looked at her when they thought she was not paying attention. Fear, that was what she saw in their eyes. They were afraid of her, even though she was just a small girl from a mountain village. They were afraid because of where she came from. But fear often turned into cruelty. People who were scared liked to make themselves feel powerful by pushing others down. Had seen this before. She had dealt with bullies in her own school on Earth. She would deal with these ones too. That night stood at her window and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Her grandmother was probably sitting on the porch right now, watching the sun set over the mountains. The old woman had given advice before she left. "Do not try to change their minds with words," she had said. "Words are cheap. Show them who you are through your actions. Stand firm when the wind blows, and never, ever ignore the feeling in your gut." Pressed her hand against the cold glass. She had a feeling in her gut right now. Something was not right about this station. Something was wrong beneath the clean white surface. But she had only just arrived. She needed to learn more before she could understand what she was sensing. For now she would watch, she would wait, she would prepare. The mountain does not argue with the storm. It simply endures. 3 weeks passed at the Galactic Unity Academy. Learned many things during that time. She learned that they needed to sleep for 12 hours every day or they became sick. She learned that they could not eat anything that moved, only special paste made from plants. She learned that they were allergic to almost everything and had to live inside special bubbles most of the time. She also learned that nobody wanted to be her friend. The other students were polite when the instructors were watching. They said hello in the corridors. They did not push her or steal her things, but when classes ended, they disappeared into their own groups and left alone. This did not bother her as much as it should have, had always been comfortable with solitude. In the mountains, she had spent many days without seeing another person. She knew how to fill her time with observation and thought. And there was plenty to observe on Station Helix 7. Notice things that the other students missed. She noticed that the lights in the eastern corridor flickered every few hours. She noticed that the floor vibrated slightly during certain times of the day. She noticed that the air sometimes smelled wrong, like metal and electricity mixed together. At first, she thought these were normal things. Every building had small problems, but as the days passed, the problems got worse. The flickering became more frequent, the vibrations became stronger, the smell became harder to ignore. Started keeping notes. She recorded every strange thing she observed, writing down the time and location. After 2 weeks, she had over 50 entries. When she put them together, a pattern emerged. The problems were all connected to the station's power system. Was not an engineer. She had not studied advanced technology, but she knew how to recognize when something was breaking down. On Earth, you learned to read the signs of danger. A crack in the ice meant the lake was not safe. A change in the wind meant a storm was coming. A sound in the forest meant a predator was near. The station was showing the same kind of signs. Something was building pressure. Something was getting ready to break. She decided to tell someone. Instructor was in his office when arrived. There was sorting through data files on his desk, his thick fingers moving slowly over the screen. He looked up when she knocked on the door frame. "Miss," he said, "how can I help you?" Held up her data pad. "I have been observing some problems with the station systems. I think there might be a serious issue." His mandibles clicked together. This was a sign of interest. "What kind of problems?" "Power fluctuations," said. She showed him her notes. "The lights in several corridors are flickering in a pattern. The floor vibrations match the timing of the power grid cycles, and there is a smell of ozone near the main conduits that is getting stronger every day." Looked at her data for a long moment. Then his mandibles clicked again, but this time the sound was different, higher pitched, amused. "Miss, I appreciate your concern, but this station has been operating for over 400 cycles without incident. Our engineers are the finest in the compact. If there was a problem, they would know. But the pattern is probably nothing more than normal maintenance cycles," interrupted. "The systems are complex. Sometimes they produce readings that seem unusual to untrained observers." Felt her jaw tighten. "I am not imagining this. The data is clear." "The data is not your specialty," said. His voice was patient but firm. "You are here to learn, miss, not to teach us how to run our station." "On Earth, we have a saying," tried again. "When the birds go silent, the predator is already watching. The signs are there if you know how to look." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Charming, but we are not on your miss. We do not need to fear predators in the shadows. Our systems are designed with multiple redundancies. Nothing can go wrong." Stared at him for a long moment. She could see that he believed what he was saying. He was not lying or trying to hide something. He simply could not imagine that anything on the station could be dangerous. That was the problem. These aliens had lived in safety for so long that they had forgotten what danger looked like. "Thank you for your time," said quietly. She left the office without another word. Over the next few days, tried to warn others. She spoke to Instructor Sorrel, the who taught navigation. She spoke to the station administrator, a large named who floated in a private chamber filled with special gases. She even spoke to the engineering department, where a group of technicians looked at her notes and then at each other, and then burst into clicking laughter. Everyone gave her the same response. The station was safe. The systems were perfect. A human girl from a primitive could not possibly understand the technology that kept them alive. Finally tried her fellow students. She found in the recreation area, playing some kind of game with colored lights. He looked up when she approached, his pearl-white eyes narrowing slightly. He said, "What do you want?" "I need you to listen to me," said. "The station has problems, real problems. If someone does not fix them soon, something bad could happen." Exchanged a look with his friends. There were 5 of them, all wearing the same expression of mild contempt. "You are still talking about your little theory?" asked. "Told me you visited him with some fantasy about power failures." "It is not a fantasy. The data shows." "The data shows that you are paranoid," cut in. "Which makes sense. Your species evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill you. Of course you see danger everywhere. It is probably a survival instinct." "This is different," insisted. "I am not imagining threats. I am observing real patterns in real systems." "You are a human," said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Your brain is designed to find patterns even when they do not exist. It helped your ancestors survive on that nightmare world of yours. But here, in civilization, it just makes you look foolish." One of the other leaned forward. "I heard that creatures cannot relax. They are always waiting for something to attack them. Is that true, human? Are you always afraid?" Felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. "I am trying to help you." "Help us?" laughed. "The thinks she can lecture us about safety. Your species still kills each other over territory. You do not even have unified planetary governance. You are barely more than animals." The words hit like a physical blow. She had faced mockery before. She had faced prejudice. But this was something else. This was pure contempt delivered with a smile. "Go back to your quarters," Terran said. "Leave the thinking to civilized species." Stood in the corridor long after they left. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. She had tried to warn them. She had tried to be helpful, and they had laughed at her. They had called her an animal. They had dismissed everything she said because of where she came from. Fine, she had done her duty. She had given them one warning. That was all she owed these people. But was not stupid. She knew that ignoring a problem did not make it go away. If the station was going to fail, she needed to be ready. That night she began to prepare. She studied the station's layout, memorizing every corridor and junction. She identified all the emergency exits and evacuation routes. She located the escape pods and learned how to operate them. She found the maintenance shafts that ran between the walls, hidden from normal view. She also started gathering supplies. A small oxygen canister from the medical bay, a thermal blanket from the supply closet, a multi-tool that she traded for with a merchant who sold things from his quarters, emergency food bars that she saved from her meals. It was not much, but on Earth you learned to survive with what you had. The vibrations in the floor were getting stronger every day. The lights were flickering more often. The smell of ozone was spreading to new areas of the station. Something was coming, could feel it in her bones. She sent one final message to her grandmother, telling her that she loved her. Then she packed her emergency supplies into a small bag and kept it next to her bed. The mountain does not argue with the storm, but a wise person prepares for the storm before it arrives. Was ready. Now all she could do was wait. The Festival of Unified Lights was the biggest celebration in the Interstellar Compact. Every year, beings from dozens of worlds gathered to remember the day their species had chosen peace over war. There were lights and music and food from 100 different planets. It was a time of joy and unity. Station Helix 7 was hosting the festival this year. Thousands of visitors had arrived over the past week. Parents with children, elderly scholars, politicians and merchants and artists. The station was more crowded than had ever seen it. She did not attend the celebration. Instead, she sat in her quarters with her data pad, watching the readings that nobody else seemed to care about. The power fluctuations had reached critical levels. The floor vibrations were almost constant now. The environmental systems were struggling to maintain proper temperature and air pressure. Something was very wrong. Had moved her emergency bag from beside her bed to her shoulders. She wore sturdy clothes and comfortable shoes instead of the soft robes that most students preferred. She looked ready to run at any moment. Because she was. The festival was happening on the main promenade, a huge open space in the center of the station. Holographic displays painted the void outside the windows with artificial lights. Music played through speakers hidden in the walls. Thousands of beings danced and talked and celebrated together. Watched through a security camera feed on her data pad, she saw and his friends moving through the crowd. She saw instructor speaking with some visiting officials. She saw administrator floating near the main stage, his colors shifting through proud blues and golds. They all looked so happy, so confident that nothing could go wrong. Then the first alarm sounded. It was a high-pitched wail that cut through the music and the chatter. Everyone stopped moving. Everyone looked around in confusion. A second alarm joined the first, then a third, then the lights went out. Emergency power flickered on. The soft white glow was replaced by harsh red light. Warning messages began scrolling across every screen on the station. Structural failure DETCTD. Evacuate immediately. Was already moving. She grabbed her bag and ran for the door. In the corridor outside, she could see people stumbling in the dim light, were crying out in their musical voices, were trying to move their heavy bodies faster than they were designed to go, were deflating as their gas bladders failed to handle the changing pressure. Through the window at the end of the corridor, saw something that made her heart stop. The outer hull of the station was buckling. A section of the ring was breaking apart, metal panels flying off into the darkness of space. Emergency force fields flickered to life, trying to hold the station together. But there were too many breaches, too many failures. This was not a small problem. This was a disaster. Forced herself to think clearly. Panic would not help her. Fear would not save her. She needed to use her training. First, she checked her oxygen supply. The canister in her bag was full. That gave her about 4 hours of breathable air if the life support failed. Second, she checked her route. The main emergency pods were on the other side of the station, past the promenade where the festival had been happening. That area was probably blocked by now. She needed to find another way. Third, she checked for other survivors. There were students huddled in the corridor. 6, 2, one small in a bubble that looked like it was losing pressure. They were all young, probably about age. They looked terrified. "Follow me," said. One of them looked up. It was. His pearl-white eyes were wide with fear. "Where?" he asked. His voice was shaking. "Away from the breach, toward the secondary hangar. I know a route." "The secondary hangar is on the other side of the station," one of them said. "We cannot make it there." "Not through the main corridors," agreed. "But there are maintenance shafts. I mapped them during my first week here. They connect to the secondary hangar." Stared at her. "You mapped the maintenance shafts. On Earth, you always know your exits." Adjusted her bag on her shoulders. "Now move, we do not have much time." They moved. The station was falling apart around them. Explosions echoed through the corridors. The floor tilted as sections of the ring broke away. Emergency force fields flickered and failed. Led the group through the chaos. She kept her data pad in one hand, using it to check for blocked routes and find new paths. The maintenance shafts were narrow and dark, but they were still intact. "I cannot fit through there," one of them said when they reached the first shaft entrance. "You can," said. "It will be tight, but you can do it. Tuck your limbs close to your body and push with your back legs." They looked at her with compound eyes full of doubt. But he tried. It took several minutes and a lot of effort, but he made it through. They kept moving. The air was getting thinner. Could feel it in her lungs. Some of them were struggling to breathe. their fragile bodies not designed for oxygen deprivation. Take small breaths, told them. Do not waste energy on talking or crying. Every breath matters. How are you so calm? Gasped. He was leaning against the wall, his thin body trembling. We are going to die. Maybe, said, but not yet, and not if I can help it. She pulled out her oxygen canister and attached a small mask to it. Then she held it up to his face. Breathe slow and steady. He obeyed. After a few breaths, the color returned to his translucent skin. Took the mask back and moved on. They found more survivors along the way. A group of students who had been in the dormitory section, a family of who had been visiting for the festival, an elderly scholar who could barely walk. Helped them all. She shared her supplies when she could. She gave directions when they were lost. She encouraged them when they wanted to give up. Why are you helping us? One of the students asked. He was from a wealthy family, remembered him from class. He had never spoken to her before. You do not owe us anything. Thought about her grandmother, about the lessons she had learned in the mountains, about what it meant to be human. On Earth, we have a saying, she said. Those who survive are responsible for those who cannot. The student stared at her like she had grown a second head. They kept moving. The group grew larger, 30 people, then 40, then 50. Most of them were students, but there were visitors and staff members too. They followed through the maintenance shafts because she was the only one who seemed to know where she was going. Finally, they reached the access point for the secondary hangar. It was sealed. A heavy metal door blocked their path. The control panel next to it was dark and unresponsive. Emergency lockdown had been triggered automatically. No, someone sobbed. We came all this way for nothing. Studied the door. It was thick metal, designed to withstand vacuum. There was no way to break through with their bare hands. But there was always another option. She pulled out her multi-tool and knelt beside the control panel. Her fingers moved quickly, prying off the cover and exposing the wires beneath. What are you doing? Asked. Overriding the lockdown, said. The emergency systems have a manual bypass. It is designed for situations exactly like this. How do you know that? Did not answer. She was too focused on the wires. Red connected to red, blue connected to blue, yellow to the ground, and then the door slid open. The secondary hangar stretched before them, dark but intact. 3 emergency shuttles waited in the launch bays. They were small, designed for 20 passengers each. Get in the shuttles, ordered. Now, do not wait for instructions, just get in. The survivors rushed forward, counted them as they passed. 53, 54, 55. Stopped beside her. Are you not coming? I will be last, said. Someone needs to make sure everyone gets aboard. But what if there is not enough room? Looked at him. Her face was calm, but there was something fierce in her eyes, something that had never seen before. Then I will find another way. The last survivor entered the shuttle, counted them one more time, 56 people plus herself, 3 shuttles with 20 seats each. There was room for everyone. She climbed into the last shuttle and sealed the door behind her. Launch, she said. The shuttles fired their engines and flew out into the darkness of space. Behind them, Station Helix 7 broke apart. The ring collapsed inward, pieces of metal and glass spinning away into the void. Emergency lights flickered and died. The festival of unified lights ended in silence. Watched through the shuttle window until there was nothing left to see. Then she sat down in an empty seat and let herself breathe. They had made it. Now all they had to do was wait for rescue. The emergency shuttles drifted through the darkness of space for 6 hours before help arrived. Spent most of that time making sure everyone stayed calm. The shuttles were not designed for comfort. They were designed for survival. The seats were hard. The air was thin. The temperature was dropping as the heating systems struggled to keep up. Many of the survivors were injured, cuts and bruises from the evacuation, broken bones from falls. One of them had cracked his shell and was leaking pale blue fluid. A child was crying for her mother, who had been in a different part of the station when the alarm started. Did what she could to help. She bandaged wounds with strips of fabric torn from her clothes. She shared the last of her emergency food bars. She held the crying child until she fell asleep. The other survivors watched her with strange expressions, fear mixed with something else, something like respect. Sat across from her, his pearl-white eyes never leaving her face. "I do not understand you," he said quietly. Looked up, "What do you not understand?" "We mocked you, we laughed at your warnings, we called you an animal." His voice cracked slightly. "And yet you saved us. You could have saved yourself and left us to die. Nobody would have blamed you." "Would they have blamed me?" "No, everyone would have understood. You owed us nothing." Was quiet for a moment. She thought about her grandmother's words. She thought about the mountain and the storm. She thought about what it meant to be human. "On Earth, survival is not just about saving yourself," she said finally. "It is about protecting your group, your family, your community. We evolved that way because one person alone cannot survive on a. We need each other." "But we are not your community," pointed out. "We are strangers who treated you badly." Shrugged. "Today, we are all just people trying to survive. Tomorrow, we can go back to being strangers. But right now, your survival is my responsibility because I was the one who could help." Stared at her for a long time. Then he bowed his head in a gesture that had learned was the sign of deep respect. "I was wrong about your species," he said. "I was wrong about you." Before could respond, the shuttle's communication system crackled to life. "Emergency vessels, this is Rescue Ship Harmony of the Interstellar Compact. We have detected your signal. Hold your position. We are approaching." A cheer went up from the survivors. People cried and hugged each other. Even the made sounds that might have been laughter. Slumped back in her seat and let out a long breath. They were going to be okay. The rescue operation took several more hours. There were medical examinations and interviews and paperwork. Lots of paperwork. The compact loved paperwork. Answered questions about what had happened. She explained her observations about the power system. She described the route she had taken through the maintenance shafts. She listed the names of everyone she had helped. The officials who interviewed her were different from instructor. They listened carefully. They took notes. They did not laugh. "You warned the station authorities about the power fluctuations," one official said. He was with a silver shell that marked him as very old and very important. They did not listen. "No," said simply. "And yet you stayed on the station. You prepared for disaster instead of evacuating yourself." "I hoped I was wrong. I wanted the experts to be right." Paused, "but I was not going to bet my life on it." The old made a clicking sound that was hard to interpret. Wise for one so young, and foolish at the same time. "Maybe," agreed, "but 56 people are alive because I was prepared." There was no response to that. A week later, was summoned to appear before the Compact's High Council. The council chamber was enormous, a dome of glass and metal that floated at the heart of the Compact's capital station. Hundreds of officials filled the seats that circled the central floor. Representatives from every species in the Compact were present. And in the middle of it all stood alone. She had been given new clothes for the occasion, clean and formal, but she still felt like the same mountain girl who had left Province months ago, small and out of place among giants. The presiding counselor was an ancient named. Her body was huge, larger than any had ever seen, and her colors shifted through patterns that seemed to contain entire languages. "Of Earth," said. Her voice was translated by speakers throughout the chamber. "You stand before this council to give testimony about the destruction of Station Helix 7. "I am ready," said. "We have reviewed the evidence. The station's structural failure was caused by cascading problems in the seismic dampening system, problems that had been building for months. Colors shifted to a deep purple, problems that you identified and reported to the station authorities, problems that were ignored. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. 1,100 beings were aboard the station during the Festival of Unified Lights, continued. 412 survived. 57 of those survivors owe their lives directly to your actions, including 39 students from the academy. Nodded, she did not trust herself to speak. We have heard from many of these survivors. They have told us about your courage, your leadership, your refusal to abandon them even when they had given you every reason to walk away. More murmurs. Some of the officials were looking at with expressions she had never seen from aliens before. Not fear, not contempt, something else. Wonder. This council has one question for you, said. You warned the station authorities. They did not listen. They laughed at you. They called your concerns primitive superstition. And yet when disaster came, you risked your life to save them. Why? Looked around the chamber. She saw end. She saw beings from worlds she could not name. She saw thousands of eyes watching her, waiting for her answer. She thought about her grandmother, about the mountain, about what it meant to be human. On Earth, she said, her voice clear and steady, we have a saying, those who survive are responsible for those who cannot. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I come from a place where everything is trying to kill you. We do not survive by abandoning each other when things get hard. We survive by standing firm, by protecting those who need protection, by refusing to give up even when the situation seems hopeless. Raised her chin slightly. I am a human. This is who we are. This is what we do. I warned them because I saw danger. I saved them because I could. It is as simple as that. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then in the observer section, someone stood up. It was. She warned us, he said. His voice echoed through the chamber. She warned us once and we laughed. We called her primitive. We called her an animal. His pearl-white eyes were wet with the expression of deep emotion. And then she saved us anyway, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. He turned to face the council directly. I have lived my entire life believing that humans were dangerous, violent, uncivilized. I was taught that we're something to fear. He paused. I was wrong. The most civilized thing I have ever witnessed was a human girl carrying an injured through a burning corridor because he could not walk on his own. The most advanced technology in the universe could not have saved us that day. Only could. Bowed deeply toward. I will never laugh at a human again. One by one, the other survivors rose from their seats. Beings from a dozen different worlds. They all bowed toward the small human girl standing in the center of the chamber. Counselor's colors shifted through patterns they could not read, but when she spoke, her voice was soft. It seems the Compact has much to learn from Earth, she said, and much to learn from you. The chamber erupted in sounds that realized was applause. Hundreds of aliens cheering for her, for a human, for a... Stood firm and let the waves of sound wash over her. The mountain does not need praise, but sometimes it is nice to be seen. The investigation into the destruction of Station Helix 7 lasted 3 months. Teams of engineers and scientists examined every piece of wreckage. They interviewed every survivor. They studied every record and log file that could be recovered. In the end, the conclusion was exactly what it predicted. The seismic dampening system had been failing for almost a year. The warning signs had been clear to anyone who knew how to read them. Power fluctuations, floor vibrations, electrical surges, all the things that had noticed during her first few weeks at the academy. But the station engineers had ignored the signs. They had trusted their automated systems. They had believed that their technology was too advanced to fail. They had dismissed the warnings of a teenage girl from a primitive, and 1,100 beings had paid the price. The compact released its official report on a cold morning in the capital station, was present, along with representatives from every member species. The words scrolled across screens throughout the galaxy. The disaster at Station Helix 7 was entirely preventable, the report concluded. Failures in leadership, overconfidence in technology, and unwillingness to listen to outside perspectives contributed to a catastrophe that should never have occurred. There was a special section about of Earth demonstrated exceptional observational skills, preparation, and courage in the face of disaster. Her warnings, though ignored, were accurate. Her actions during the evacuation saved 57 lives. The compact formally recognizes her contribution and recommends that her approach to risk assessment be studied and incorporated into future training programs. Read the words 3 times, then she closed the document and walked away. Praise was nice, recognition was meaningful, but it did not bring back the 700 people who had died. It did not heal the wounds that the survivors still carried. It did not undo the weeks of mockery and dismissal that had endured before anyone was willing to listen. Sometimes being right felt like losing. In the weeks that followed, became famous. Her story spread across the compact through news reports and personal accounts. Everyone wanted to know about the girl who had warned the aliens and then saved them when they refused to listen. She received messages from strangers on hundreds of worlds. Some thanked her for showing them what humans were really like. Some apologized for the way their species had treated Earth. Some asked for advice on how to prepare for emergencies. Answered as many as she could, but eventually there were too many to count. The Galactic Unity Academy was going to be rebuilt. The compact had already chosen a new location, a station that was further from any dangerous spatial phenomena. This time, human engineers would be consulting on every safety system. Human experts would review the emergency procedures. Human perspectives would be welcomed instead of dismissed. Was offered a position as a special advisor. She could stay in space, help design the new academy, and train the next generation of students to think the way she thought, to see the way she saw. She said no. "I appreciate the offer," she told the council representative who delivered it. "But I am not meant for politics or administration. I am just a girl from the mountains. I did what anyone from Earth would have done." "Not anyone," the representative said. He was a young with a bronze shell. "I was there that day. I was one of the students you saved. I saw the others. Most of them froze. Most of them waited for someone else to take charge. Only you moved." "Maybe," said, "but that does not mean I should spend the rest of my life in a meeting room." The representative made a clicking sound that had learned to recognize as respect. "Then, what will you do?" Thought about her grandmother, about the mountains of Provence, about the smell of pine trees and the sound of wind through the valley. "I am going home," she said. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, just like the journey out. But this time did not spend her days reading about alien species. She spent them looking at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened and trying to figure out what it meant. She had gone to space as a representative of humanity. She had been dismissed and mocked and treated like an animal. And then, when everything fell apart, she had stood firm and proved what humans were capable of. Was that enough? Had she changed anything? She did not know. When her ship finally entered Earth's atmosphere, pressed her face against the window and watched the familiar blue and green and white grow larger beneath her. Mountains and oceans and clouds. The planet that had made her who she was. Her home. Her grandmother was waiting at the landing site. The old woman looked smaller than remembered, her hair, her back more bent, but her eyes were the same, sharp and calm and endlessly patient. "So," her grandmother said as walked down the ramp, "the mountain has returned." Hugged her tightly. "I missed you, grandmother." I know, I saw the news. The old woman pulled back and studied his face. You did well. I tried. That is all anyone can do. Her grandmother smiled slightly. Now come, I made your favorite soup, and you can tell me everything. They walked together toward the village, leaving the landing site and its official observers behind. The path wound through forests of pine and oak, past streams and meadows, and the occasional deer that watched them from the shadows. Breathe deeply. The air smelled like earth and growing things, like home. The aliens are strange, she said after a while. They live in such safe places. They have forgotten what it means to be afraid. And you reminded them. Not on purpose, I just saw what they could not see, did what they could not do. Her grandmother nodded. That is the way. We survive not because we are stronger or smarter, but because we never forget that danger is real. We prepare. We adapt. We stand firm when others run. I stood firm, said quietly, even when they laughed at me. Of course you did. You are my granddaughter. They reached the village as the sun was setting behind the mountains. The houses were small and simple, nothing like the gleaming stations of the compact. But they were solid, built to last, built by people who knew that nature was not gentle and technology could not solve everything. That night sat on the porch with her grandmother, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the compact was still discussing her actions, still debating what to do about the strange humans from the strange. They will come back, said the compact. They will want more humans to join their academy, more students, more advisors, more examples. Probably, her grandmother agreed, and they will learn what we have always known. What is that? The old woman smiled, her wrinkled face softening in the starlight. That the mountain does not argue with the storm. It does not beg or plead or explain itself. It simply endures. And when the storm passes, the mountain is still standing. She reached over and took his hand. You stood firm, granddaughter. When everyone else broke, you held. That is what it means to be human. That is what it means to come from a. Looked at the stars and thought about everything she had seen. The gleaming stations, the terrified aliens, the chaos and destruction, the lives she had saved. She thought about who had bowed to her in front of the entire council. She thought about the survivors who had followed her through the dark. She thought about the word that had followed her everywhere in space. Yep. It was not an insult anymore. It was a description, a recognition of what her species had overcome just to exist, a badge of honor. I will probably go back someday, she said, when I am ready, when they need me again. I know, her grandmother said. The mountain does not hide from storms, it faces them. But for now, rest, heal, remember who you are. The old woman squeezed her hand. The galaxy will still be there when you are ready. Leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The night wind carried the smell of the forest and the distant sound of running water. Everything was peaceful. Everything was still. Somewhere across the stars, the compact was changing. Humans were being seen differently. The word was taking on new meaning. Not primitive, not dangerous, not something to fear. Unbreakable. And in the academies, new emergency preparedness curriculum, being written at this very moment by committees that included human advisors. The first lesson was simple. When a human warns you of danger, listen. The mountain had taught the storm what it meant to endure. And the girl from Provence slept peacefully under the stars of her home,